alchemical literature is a kind of labyrinth. That labyrinth needs an Ariadne's thread in order to find one's way through it and out of it. So that usually, traditionally, it is one needs to be initiated into some of the secrets. I had the privilege of having worked in a speculative manner for a number of years, and having published my first book on the subject, which was in the Art and Imagination series that Thames and Hudson was doing. And I brought them an alchemical project for the facsimile of a famous manuscript at the British Library, which was then housed in the British Museum. And Derek Turner was keeper of manuscripts at the British Museum, sent me to Thames and Hudson, and they said, "Oh, we'd love to do this, but in the meantime, would you please do a book for us for that series?" And I jumped at it because it gave one the credentials to go to all the famous research libraries like the Vatican and all over Europe, to places where no ordinary person can enter and get access to, because they're extremely strict as to who they will let in. So I had the credentials, and therefore I was eager, despite doing it on, it cost far more than one actually made in the fee that they proposed to do the research. The research was so fascinating, and it was something that I was so passionate about, that there was no way not to do it, and that led to other work and with the same firm, and to my spending many years in research. During that period, when my first work was out, I realized that to do a French version, one didn't want to translate the English, because one thinks differently in different languages. And moreover, there were different texts that one could bring to the fore. It wasn't about my opinions on a given subject. It was in service of the subject. You wanted to bring to the fore little-known material, which is what I was able to do. During that process, I met Eugène Cancelier, was the only disciple of the great alchemist known as Fulcanelli. He's a legendary figure. His books have been translated, The Mystery of Cathedrals, Philosopher's Dwellings. Those books were translated well or ill, but they exist in English. I was, if you will, initiated in a sense, and had the privilege to spend a lot of time with Eugène Cancelier, who was a much older person, and he imparted a lot he liked me and imparted a lot of things which were absolutely key to going to another step. And then years of work on, while I was doing research and meditating on how to word this vast sort of anthology of hermetic engravings in alchemical literature of the 17th century, which became known as the Golden Game, a very famous book in many languages, very difficult to find, is, despite being reprinted, It's always sold out and so on. So again, it was a question of fabricating an instrument which other researchers could use. If it had been available, I felt I wouldn't have had to make it myself, you know, if you could just buy it. But it was one of those things, you know, nobody had actually done it. So to put all these different emblems together, there were numerous books, because in the 17th century, printing improved so much that they could do these beautiful reproductions of copper plate engravings, very fine engravings. And the original books, you know, when you have them, are so remarkably beautiful that even modern reproductions of them hardly do complete justice. I mean, they give you something wonderful, but if you can ever compare side by side, you know, reproductions in a book and the actual original material, it's absolutely extraordinary. I'm thinking, for instance, of Flood's works. My friend Lee McCloskey and I were able to get a set of the original 17th century books, which are big folio volumes, with extraordinary, you know, there's these wonderful plates about music and a kind of hermetic vision of harmonic proportions and all these things. All that requires that one has some sort of training which in how to discern that which is a smoke screen put there by the ancients to lead astray those that wanted the shortcut to some sort of treasure or something, and who wanted to know for base material reasons how to do these things. They were very wary of giving away the what they considered profoundly important secrets. So one has to do that work oneself, but there are certain conditions, just as you said, of being away from electrosmog, from any kind of interference with different forces that may interfere with these things, and meditating on specific texts like Ovid's Metamorphoses and so on, which is very, very useful. There is a hermetic interpretation of Greek and Roman myths, for instance, which is utterly fascinating. And it allows ingress into those type of things. It's rather wonderful. And so my work has been, in that field, has been inspired by what you would possibly term a traditional form of knowledge. But of an initiatory nature, I would say. I mean, at the risk of, you know, nowadays, it's so funny because when one is talking about things that are beyond the scope of so-called normal, everybody wants these things to be as public as possible. There's no reason for any kind of secret and so on. But that's not the case in those matters, and one finds time and again that vulgarization is to be avoided at all costs. And that one can approach things and try to explain them, but not explain, give an inkling of what they might mean in an oblique fashion. But it's very difficult to make sense of these things, even with historians of science and people who are blinded by what is known today about these matters. Because knowledge, it doesn't seem to make sense, especially since the alchemists, the adepts, those who succeeded in achieving important results, often attempted to rationalize things, seemingly, in ways that made no sense whatsoever, because there was no technical or scientific language to express these things. That's what I think we've gone a little bit too deep into this. I don't know if we've lost anybody listening to that, but it may be valuable to hear it in that sense.